Hello everyone, Laura Giffen here to both talk about and highly recommend this wonderful book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, published in 2010. This book, as the title would suggest, chronicles the life, death, and remarkable effect of an African-American woman from Virginia who moved to Baltimore with her family to escape Jim Crow, poverty, and a chaotic home life to find greater success north of the Mason-Dixon during the 1940s. Here's the interesting part of Mrs. Lack's story. You may not think you have heard of her, but if you have ever participated in or read any scientific research that has used human cells, you've heard of her. And certainly, if you live in the United States today, and if you have ever benefited from advanced medical techniques developed since the 1950s, you've benefited from her life. This is because the HeLa cells, so famous in biological science, the human sample cells that almost all research in the U.S. in the last 60 years has used in some form or another, come from Henrietta Lacks, hence the name HeLa. They are cancer cells, harvested from her body by George Otto Gay, a tissue scientist at Johns Hopkins University, without her consent and without compensation to her or her family, in order to found a billion-dollar scientific research industry, using her cells to inform research on everything from medicine to space travel to the atom bomb, all without the knowledge of her family until decades later, when they were eventually informed of these cells' existence with catastrophic consequences for their family. In this work, Skloot seeks to both find the woman behind the HeLa cells and to tell her story and that of her family, particularly of her surviving daughter, Deborah Lacks, in order to reveal the woman behind the abstraction of HeLa. In doing so, she describes not just the story of Henrietta Lacks and her family, but also describes in detail her personal journey and struggle in gaining the trust of the Lacks family and community in order to find more about this incredibly influential woman. In doing so, this book becomes about three things. First and foremost, the woman Henrietta Lacks, her story, and that of her family. But this book is also about the story of a white woman experiencing and acknowledging for the first time the difficulty of wrestling with issues of race, science, and the medical-industrial complex in the United States. Finally, this book is a deeply political work about the long, complex, and ultimately exploitative history of African Americans by the scientific community. I highly recommend this book, particularly for an upper division high school English class, for three distinct but related reasons and purposes. First, this book is a highly accessible book, both in terms of language and in terms of its use of rich and compelling storytelling in conveying difficult subject matter. This would be a great text to introduce more nonfiction into a classroom, particularly as we talk more as a community about disciplinary literature. Second, this book wrestles deeply with issues of racism and exploitation in the scientific community, a topic that does not get enough press in a culture that vaults science and scientists without much critical discourse about the role science has and continues to have in our society. Lastly, this book provides a real opportunity to work with teachers in other disciplines to create a creatively integrated curriculum. Because of the nature of the subject matter, this book carries the opportunity to invite discussion about these issues in terms of scientific ethics, as well as invites an exploration of some of the actual science discussed in the book. This book also provides an opportunity to expand the discussion to include instructors of history in discussions about race and racism during Jim Crow and the Civil Rights eras. In short, Skloot achieves with this work creating an entry point for a diverse and in particular young audience to a host of painful but important issues to consider in a way that is both engaging and informative. I cannot recommend this book enough for your classrooms or for anyone else interested in the topic.